All right, we're going to have our second class on virtues in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Remember last time I said that the fellowship was, in the characters of the fellowship, we see many virtues represented, and senses of the good life that they themselves represent. They represent all the peoples of Middle-earth and everything good in it. And that's why the representation is important, because there's diversity in their midst, in the different races and peoples. And we could see that a little bit in, and I'm interested in the similarities between Lewis's sci-fi series and Tolkien's Lord of the Rings in the peoples as well. And even the connection with the life of the mind and with education. And I think I mentioned, but it doesn't hurt if I repeat myself anyway, I think that the Hrossa represent the trivium. They're the poets, but they represent the knowledge that comes through words, and the Sorns represent the quadrivium. The modern correspondences of that are the arts and the sciences. And then the Fifiltrigi for Tolkien represent the practical outworking of that. Maybe like an engineer, but somebody who fashions things, even an artist to some degree, is represented by the practical outworking of the seven liberal arts. Remember, the liberal arts are just different ways of thinking about theology, because theology is the queen of the sciences and directs those seven ways that are under her, so that they're rightly purposed and so forth. But then when it comes to application in the material world, that can be very much the artisan. So in the Lord of the Rings, it seems to me, the elves are very much like the Sorns, and the hobbits very much like the Hrossa, and the dwarves like the Fifiltrigi. Many similarities there. The world of men, note that they're not represented by any of those things, but they inherit all of them. And Gandalf, who's a figure of wisdom, seems to, and as a sort of a prophetic figure as well, seems to draw upon them as the theologian, if you will, even though there's no theology. So he is the queen of the sciences. All those that are under him, he guides them at any rate, provides wisdom. And again, he goes at the front end, and Aragorn comes at the back end. So it's the age in which the Astari are leading the fellowship, but the man who's at the back will eventually take over. In a sense, Gandalf's death shows us that that's what's happening here. That's what we're told at the end of the Lord of the Rings. Now it's the age of men. So all these other beings are eventually going to disappear, I think is hinted at the very least. But the part that connects with the life of virtue is that these characters, whatever their races are, seem to have what we would recognize as the four cardinal virtues. Remember I said the word cardus here. I talked about the Roman road, but actually it's more of a hinge. It's a virtue that on which things turn. And really, from a Christian vantage point, and again, Tolkien being Christian, just like Lewis is, these virtues that the pagan world recognizes, that we see in Beowulf, for instance, but also in the Greco-Roman period, are baptized, to use Lewis's phrase, eros baptized, by Christian virtues, and the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. And the greatest of these being charity is what drives the whole plot for Lewis and for Tolkien. And I think this is really interesting. I already traced it in Lewis, at least last semester, spent a great deal of time showing how love was the prime motivator in his fiction. And even with that understanding of love, that the agape love was the most important form and really was necessary so that the disordered loves would not do exactly that and serve darkness rather than light. And so another way of putting charity is in terms of grace. And I'll talk more about that next time in terms of just the seemingly arbitrary plot design. I already talked about those already. That, Frodo falling into Frodo the ring falling in the cracks of Mount Doom and so forth. But the ring coming to Frodo. But also the repeated reference to Aragorn being lucky. It comes over and over, how lucky he is. And this is an aspect of his prudence to some degree, is that it isn't just luck. I mean, when I grew up, I remember somebody's father saying, if you're really good, you make your own luck. I don't know if you heard that as well. You make your own, yeah. And I think that there's something in that. Virtue, in a sense, does put you in the position where you can be lucky. It doesn't mean you're going to be, but you're in the position for that to be the case. But being in the position isn't sufficient to get you where you want to go. And the fellowship fails precisely for that reason. The virtues that they possess are not adequate to do what needs to be done. Even Gandalf does not have what it takes. And he recognizes that. And that's one of his greatest virtue is his self-awareness and his humility. And his awareness that he lacks what's needed to do what is necessary. And that is to destroy the ring. And it's ironically, or at least ironic from the vantage point of modernity, which thinks that all you need to have is good intentions and to love everybody and want the right thing and to do it for the right reasons, that Gandalf disavows that sentiment and says that, understand, Frodo, I would use the ring for good, to heal the wounds of the earth. But what he would not do is destroy the ring then, and so it would distort him, and it would have a different purpose, and Middle-earth would look different for a time, and he would be fooled by the ring into thinking that evil was something that could be cooperated with, and that's the point. Because there's a sharp distinction between good and evil. Evil's not a different thing. It's the privation of the good. And it would, by using it, it would corrode the good in a different way than Sauron would. He would mean well. Sauron he's more George Orwell, right? It's a scarier future. And Gandalf would do more of a Huxley and give us Soma and make everyone feel happy all the time. But the corrosive effect of the ring on everyone would still be felt. And he recognizes that. So there's no room for sentimentality here. It needs to be destroyed, and I'm not the one to do it. It hasn't come to me. That's the point. It's even offered to him. It's offered to a few figures. One of them is Gandalf, another is Galadriel. Very wise figures, you would think. They're the people to... And I think at one point in the Council of Elrond, they even discussed leaving the ring there in Rivendell. And Elrond dismisses it and says that the elves cannot cover the evil. That's an interesting phrase. We can't cover it any longer. It's grown. We can't. The goodness is not, because their goodness is not enough to eradicate it, and ultimately it's going to fester. Likewise, they can't, when the suggestion from Boromir is that they take the ring, or actually I don't even think it's Boromir, I think it is his father that suggests that he would take the ring and put it down deep and never use it. And he said, and Gandalf replies to him, it would be impossible, and it would destroy your mind even knowing that it was there. The temptation would break you. So again, the thing that needs to be done is for the ring to be destroyed, and the virtues are what allow you to at least move in the direction of it, but ultimately impossible to take you where you need to be. For that to be necessary, a power outside of the fallen world, which is what we have in Middle-earth, is necessary, and that is the grace of God. Not that it's called God, but the providential ordering, the happenstance, people get lucky. This happens then, and just happens that on this day the light shines, the troops come over the hill, and there's just enough time. And there's a sense of, again, that the timing seems such a key issue here. And that's part of what builds the suspense. Look for me on the 5th day, right, at the breaking of the dawn and all that. And then you hear, and you forget about those sayings when you're reading the books or even watching the films. And because the reality of the assault of evil seems so potent that you forget the light. And despair creeps in. And they forget, and then it's the 5th day, right? In the siege of the 2 towers. But they ride out thinking that it's the last ride that they're going to make. Aragorn rides out. And they think, again, this is the end, but at least we'll not go down cowering in our caves. And then Gandalf comes. But they forgot, that doesn't seem to be even in their mind at that point. It probably ought to be, but it doesn't seem to be. It's far from their thoughts. Again, when you face evil, it's hard to remember the good. One of the great dangers of evil is making you think it's more than it is, which is why I said last time, in the creeds it doesn't mention the devil, even though Christian theology always acknowledges it, but it's not. You don't want to give the devil too much of his due. Even by talking about it, it's problematic. Did you have a comment or a question? Yes.
So I guess that's a portrait of how the fight is not dependent on victory. It's the point of the fight is to resist in Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And victory comes from like an outside.
Because there's a recognition of the nature of the evil that they're fighting. It's not Sauron. He is the manifestation, but again, they even have the sense that the evil will last beyond the destruction of the ring. That's actually stated. And it does end up being that way. It's one of my greatest objections to the film, is that you sort of lose the sense that evil lasts beyond the destruction of the ring. And then you get into then the view of evil, which I said was heretical, the idea that evil is a thing and good is a thing, and the bad thing's been beaten by the good thing, so now there's no bad thing left. That's not the way it is. That wouldn't explain the evil within the company either. Or the effect and all that. And Tolkien does lean in the Augustinian direction very strongly. But he acknowledges that the closer you get to evil or the source of evil, the more weighty it seems. And he literally illustrates that by making the ring feel weightier to Frodo when he's being overcome by it. And isn't that how addictions work with people? They feel like they can't stop. And they can't will themselves out of it. They seem powerless. And people who aren't addicted say, like, what? It's just a drink, man, or whatever, right? Just have a shot, and everybody else, and it's like, I can't do it. But literally can't. There's something that has deprived the person of the will to be able to resist there. And so then it's prudent to avoid it altogether. It's the only path forward. And that I would say that the ring in the company functions something like that. Never put it on. Never put it on. Because the more you put it on, the greater its effect on you, the more you'll want to wear it, the less resistant you'll be, etc., etc. So those moments when Frodo puts it on, which are totally understandable, by the way, in the context of the story. In fact, all of those, including Samwise, he puts it on. Of course he's going to put it on. It lets him escape. He goes invisible. Wouldn't you do that? Of course you would. Yes, so you've done something which seems to be good. It's a necessary evil. Now, note the phrase, it's a necessary evil. Really, was it necessary? Who knows? Because once you've committed the evil, of course it then becomes a necessity, and your future is changed by that. But the counsel of wisdom is never to do it. But it seems prudent. So Tolkien is speaking against the sort of pragmatism, utilitarianism of his day as well. Let's use bad things to defeat evil. Are you not becoming evil by defeating evil then? That's the problem. And really, what have you defeated then? Do you not recognize that evil is something that is on both sides of a conflict? For Tolkien, most certainly it is, because the evil that he's talking about is that of sin. And all of the creatures of Middle-earth are subject to it. Not just the humans, but even the other beings, in their very particular ways. So he portrayed, last time I talked about this, about the four cardinal virtues, and I spoke last time of prudence, only because prudence, and in conjunction with wisdom, prudence is the one that seems to master the rest. It rules all the rest. You wouldn't normally think that. Prudence just seems like a relatively minor virtue. But being prudent is knowing how to act and when to act in accordance with wisdom. So it's not just knowing what the wise thing is, it's putting it into practice. And I think that Aragorn is the best representation of this. He knows when to act and how to act. And those sorts of things are very hard to teach. You can't teach them in a classroom. You can observe them in other people. And so the world becomes the classroom then. People talk about the University of Hard Knocks or whatever, the school of life, some people on social media. I don't have a PhD. I have a PhD in the school of hard knocks. And I think, oh, well, okay, maybe you do, actually. I've met people like that, very wise, and know how to act way better than the academics, who have a lot of knowledge, but often not too much prudence. But he has that, and so does Gandalf, for that matter. And the reason that we know that Gandalf has it is because he learns that Bilbo, who told him a story, has actually lied about it. And they seem to be able to discern then that everything that they're hearing, even from their friends, is not the whole of the story. And they can start to piece things together, and from that picture, then they can also draw conclusions about what motivated the lie to begin with. Why did Bilbo lie about how he came across the ring? What was it that made him lie to his friend and mentor? And it says that the wizard, in the text says the wizard seemed to think that the truth was important. So it wasn't, I need to get to the bottom of this. I can't just take it on Bilbo's word. And the reason why is because truth is not something that changes that. Right? So I need to get to something that is not manipulated by the perspective or the bias of the person who's telling me says they're telling me the truth. In the courts of law, we're asked to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The second phrase is important there. It's the whole truth. Most people, when they tell lies, tell it on a variation of the truth. Like there's a little bit of the truth in there. And so they say, well, I told you the truth. Yeah, but you didn't tell me the bit that incriminated you and is pertinent. I have children. And I was once one myself, and was pertinent to the case here. Yes, you're telling me exactly the truth, but you're leaving out that little bit, which is relevant here. Did you hit your brother in the head? No, I threw a ball. Right? Did the ball hit your brother in the head? Yes. But I didn't mean to do it. I didn't ask you to do that. I asked if you hit your brother, and that sort of thing. Anyway, it's important to Gandalf because he's noting a common tendency of the ring, which he's also observed elsewhere, and he can read about in relation to various creatures that have come across this great ring of power, starting with Elendil, but also in Gollum, and now in Bilbo. It has a common effect. And so and it's the effect of the ring. And so what he notices with that, it also is that the people who are telling the lies don't even realize that they're lying. They believe their own lies. And then they start to get lost in it. And that's one of the great reasons to tell the truth, by the way, is when you start telling falsehoods, you lose the recognition of the true boundary between truth and falsehood. You start to believe it yourself. And actually, to sell the lie, you have to believe what you say. And sometimes it's helpful for people to hold you to account and say, well, actually, yes, you did say that. However, there was this and this and that. And then the person who lied can sometimes say, well, you're right. I forgot about that. And there's a sort of a recognition. Like when David commits adultery with Bathsheba and is confronted by Nathan the prophet. Right? He becomes aware. We who are reading the story know that David did what he did, that he not only committed adultery but had her husband killed. But David doesn't seem to be aware of it, even when listening to a story that's clearly directly pointing to him. He hears the story, he's outraged, wants the man who did such a thing to be killed, punished for what he did. And then Nathan says, you're the man. And he repents immediately. It's interesting, the role of the word then in revealing the truth to him. Very important lesson there about telling the truth. And it's a healing effect. So there's the part about the truth. People see the cutting, and it cuts out the lies, but it actually also heals the wounds of falsehood, which are the privation of the good in the person. Because the person starts to get twisted by the sin, they can tell more lies. They try to cover it up, and maybe they'll commit another murder. Look at the character of Macbeth. Right? He does, and he doubles down and triples down and keeps on, and then his whole life is there to consolidate the ill-gotten gains, and he becomes a truly wicked individual because nobody will hold him to account, and nobody will tell him the truth, and he doesn't want the truth to come out. So truth is essential here, and it is wisdom's the path of wisdom to find the truth and hold to the truth. And wisdom comes to some degree with suffering. And we'll look at that. Or let's talk about this in relation to Gandalf. When he dies, first of all, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go into Helm's Deep, or he doesn't want to go, not into Helm's Deep, into the Mines of Moria. He doesn't want to go. He wants to go any other path. That path he does not want to go. And Sauron rather knows he doesn't want to go there, and he wants to force him to go there. And that's interesting. Now, you're going to go up with a mountain pass. I'm going to create a big snowstorm so you cannot go that way. And you don't want to go that way, and I'm going to make you go that way. And in the end, he accepts that he must go that way. And it's a little bit, again, you can see a little bit of an allusion to Christ there in the Garden of Gethsemane. I don't want to go that way. But if it's the will, there is no other choice, this is the only way, then I will go this way. And then he dies. He falls and is down there for an age, and then is resurrected, and he becomes Gandalf the White, and all that sort of language, a resurrection. But he does not want to die. Why, I have no idea. Doesn't make entire sense in the context of the novel. The story. Why exactly does Gandalf not want to do this when we know with hindsight that he will be raised up from it and will have greater power? In fact, he becomes the head of the Order at that point. And Saruman, who was the head of the Order, will lose that position and have his staff broken. Will be cast out of the Order, in fact. What entitles this Istari named Gandalf to take place of the head of the Order? That he's willing to lay down his life. That he was willing to let the grace of the Valar who led the whole thing to have their way. He didn't know he was going to be raised, I think is the point. I think he thought that was the end of him. But he was willing to do it. That's my guess. Again, I don't think it's fleshed out in the book at all. I can't remember in the letters Tolkien's comment on it. There might be something there. But it seems quite, from the characters and their expressed motivation, he desperately does not want to go there. And he only goes there when the ring bearer says, we'll go there. When Frodo says, because he says, and he's the leader, we'll leave it to the ring bearer to decide. And he says, we'll go there. And Gandalf's like, okay, all right, there we go then. And he knows what it means for him. So the wisdom of Gandalf leads him to the point where he is able to lead the company on, but it does not lead to him to the point where he wants to die. That's a revelation of grace. And what I'm trying to do here repeatedly is show how the virtues of the characters lead them in the right direction, but they never get them far enough, and they can't even see that they need that. Is that a question? No, you're just holding your glasses. Okay. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So there is an insistence on Tolkien's part, it seems to me, that the figures of the Fellowship of the Ring that represent the goodness, beauty, and truth of Middle-earth and fight for it, but can't stop its privation from evil, are aided in this by a supernatural power outside of the context of their company that leads them through all of their adventures. And that includes Aragorn then when he'll go down into the realm of the dead. Everyone's, why would you go that way? Of all ways, why would you go that way? Again, to the other characters like Éowyn, this is throwing your life away. Why would you do such a thing? Again, same thing with Boromir. Why would you do that? They all express incredulity, and that includes the good characters. That is exactly the wrong thing to do. That makes no sense. And I think we're not supposed to think that they're missing the point. I think we're supposed to agree with them. It makes no sense to do this. Why would you not use it? And the truth is everyone would use it in their situation. Boromir is not a bad man. He's a very good man. Very good. And therein lies his weakness. He thinks that his virtue is all that he's got. And he is the man of virtue. And that's why his father loves him. He is as courageous as a lion. And that will avail him nothing. That's the problem. That's what Aragorn realizes. You are the mightiest of men. Yes. And that is worth spit. It will do nothing for you. Right? And he recognizes that because he is the heir of Elendil. And men, the race of men is weak. Fatally weak. Not in the sense that we just need a more courageous, if the man were just courageous enough, then there is no man courageous enough for this. Did you have a question or a comment?
Well, as I've been reading through the Silmarillion, that line that says men were fated to die.
Yes.
And just like how that theme seems like very important, that of all the creatures in Middle Earth, like men have like this tie to
death.
death.
Yes, and it's a blessing.
Yes.
It's not meant as a curse there.
Yeah.
It's part of their nature. Yes. To be finite in their lifespan. Whereas the elves, not so. They have a different, and each of the different beings is a different origin story and a different strength and a different weakness from that. But yes. And of course what men then do with the power of the ring for them is to lend them immortality. That's the attraction. It will extend their life. It does that with everyone who wields it, actually, including the hobbits. Like we see that with Bilbo. He's 11E1 at the beginning. 111. How old is that? Very old. Nobody remembers a hobbit being that old. But he looks like he hasn't aged a day. What's it done to him? What's stretched his life out like butter over too much bread? So he feels thin. What does that mean exactly? Who knows? But there's something in him that is tired. And even while his body seems vital, his spirit seems stretched. It's not exactly clear, but I think it's the effect of the ring. So he's got a great body. Like he looks like he did when he was young. In fact, he might even look better. He hasn't aged a day. But underneath the surface, something's going on. And that's what he talks about. There's something that is not good here going on within me. Now we can see it in the form of Gollum differently. It seems to it's twisted him. He's physically twisted. He's no longer, and he's very ugly, and it makes him seek dark places, and he hates the light and hates elven things, and it burns, the rope around his neck burns him and so forth. So the good now actually it hurts him, and yet he longs for it. He responds well to goodness. When he's well treated, it makes a little bit of Smeagol come out and a little less Gollum. So he starts to grow from that, and the fact that Frodo treats him kindly makes him love Frodo and hate Sam, because Sam realizes actually there's a traitor in there and he is going to betray you, and Frodo knows this, that he will as well, and that's the extraordinary thing. And again, Christ-like. Think about Christ, who has as one of his disciples the man who will betray him, Judas, and yet he lets him come along and thinks that might be a part of the whole. Well, in Jesus' case, he doesn't think it might be a part of it. It is part of God's plan to be betrayed. Not that he wants to be betrayed, but that in his economy, the betrayal will actually do a good thing. Yes?
I was wondering, Professor, if in your opinion there's any significance to the fact that just as there are the 9 in the fellowship, there are also the 9 in
Yes.
the school.
Yes. I think it's explicitly said at one point. That there are 9 corresponding to the 9. But note that the difference there, the 9 there are 9 men, and they're 9 kings, and they're 9 kings that have fallen under the influence of the ring, and they are without character or distinction. They're shadows. They're 9 shadow kings. And at various points they get identified. So the chief of them is the Witch King of Angmar and so forth, and then there are others in there. But as far as they appear now, they're just the 9 riders. They don't have names in general, and they don't have virtues, they don't have any qualities. They're all just committed as a sort of a mindless, we want the ring. And they serve Sauron. They don't seem to have an individuality anymore. There's no virtue in them. They're committed to the same sorts of things, whereas the 9 of the company represent every race of Middle-earth, and they are actually very different from one another. And at the same time of delight to one another. And that grows, and that's part of what makes the fellowship delightful, is seeing how they at first really dislike one another in certain cases. So the elf and the hobbit, the elf and the dwarf can't stand each other. It's a racial hostility that goes back generations. Never trust a dwarf. Never trust an elf. And they say it over and over. It's pure racism. Right? Why can't you trust them? Because look at his identity. You can't. Not possible. But what they get is and there's a genuine difference there. They are actually different races, unlike what we call racism, where different human beings. That's not a racial thing. Whereas here you have a genuine different race. You have this is an elf, this is a dwarf, this is a hobbit, this is an ant, whatever. Here we have genuine differences and genuine hostility to the point where we can the dwarves will not come in the wood. It's not permitted. Pain of death, no chance. No, there's no correspondence. We won't even talk to these people. And they not only walk together in a fellowship, they then fight for one another and love one another. And that's one of the, again, the virtues of the Fellowship of the Ring, is that they grow in estimation for one another. And it's genuine, and it's tangible. It really comes across well in the film, I think. Genuine affection and even admiration. So the dwarf, Gimli, is the most is the representation of courtesy. And generally they're rough, right? And the elves, they work with stone, and they're tough. They swing an axe, very strong, very hard, coarse speech. He asks for the hairs from Galadriel's head, like a courtly lover. And the elves are charmed by this. Like, what courtesy is this? Same thing with the halflings. Everyone seems to take delight in them. They look small, but then they do extraordinary things. So genuine appreciation of gifts and features they just don't have. Who's going to bear the ring? The least of all the creatures of Middle-earth. The most unlikely, which is why even the great don't even know they exist. Sauron doesn't even look into the Shire. It's only Gandalf that took any interest in the Shire. He's upbraided for that by Sauron. You've been smoking too much of the halfling's pipeweed, I see. He addled your brains. You didn't realize the ring was right in the midst of your grasp. He didn't really care about it. And they do things that they don't expect. Like, again, they're timid creatures. They don't want to go out and fight, but then you get them in a battle, and suddenly something appears that wasn't there before. Like, they jump on the back of the cave troll and backstabbing it and so forth, and fight against, again, the 9 riders. They're right there, right? And plunges Merry plunges the knife into the Witch King of Angmar, which wounds him terribly in the process, but kills. It's extraordinary. And then pleads himself offers himself in service to Denethor as a vassal, and he accepts the service. Again, it's extraordinary. What you would associate with a knight. That sort of humility and courtesy and bravery. And most improbable, not what you expect, and everyone's moved by. He repeatedly shows how the hard men, virtuous men, are moved by the little hobbits. Anyway, so there is prudence there, there's wisdom, and there is also moral growth that goes along with it. And I described that a little bit, and we could trace it out in various characters. You actually see the characters grow in their and develop, and this is why it's a very rich plot. Is not only do you have multiple protagonists, you see them change over the course of time in significant ways. They're not flat characters. They're not Marvel superheroes who are terribly flat. The best they have is a line, but they don't actually develop. They don't become better. They don't become worse. They just perform acts. It's like Harry Potter, same thing, flat characters. No better, no worse, just superpower. Everybody's marveling, oh, Harry, whatever. But nothing to admire in that. We can see everybody doing the admiration, clapping, but no real recognizable growth in characters. We do see it in all of the characters of Middle-earth, actual growth, in ways that we would recognize as partaking of goodness and truth and beauty and wisdom, etc., and charity, and the willingness to lay down their lives for the others, etc. All of these things, which you don't see at first. Even Éowyn, who wants to die when we meet her. In Peter Jackson's film, he makes a big deal out of Arwen. She's not really in the books at all. Whatever. They want more female characters. Okay. I mean, she does marry Aragorn, so it's somewhat perverse for Tolkien to throw her in the appendix. It's she's important. But there in the appendix, not in the context of the story. He didn't want that in there, but Éowyn is there, and she is the one who then fights against and defends her father and goes incognito riding as, Dernhelm, into battle, and as a woman defeats him. So again, very much he's taking it off from Macbeth. No one of woman born, right? In this case, no man will. It's just a variation on the same thing. Can kill me. I'm not a man, right? Helmet off. And then she does the I am woman, hear me roar thing and stabs him through it. Never mind. Throwing a bone to the feminists, but I don't need to go down that path. But he's showing something there extraordinary, because that act is not one of virtue per se. I mean, it is a little bit, but it's denying the virtue and duty that is attendant upon her. Now, she's done what she's told not to do. You're supposed to stay behind. She doesn't want to stay behind. Why? Because she wants to die. It's not because she wants to defend what's good. If she'd done that, she would have stayed behind. It's because she wants to die. There's something that's crept into her heart that has led her to despair. And she makes an idol of Aragorn and longs to follow him. She sees in him something that she desires, but it's a sort of an idol. And again, this is where the books are great and the film isn't, because again, she's a flat character in the films, and so is Faramir, whereas in the books they're both very rich, deep characters that develop enormously. And they have a very similar life experience. And in the end, she falls in love, of course, with Faramir, and he heals her and vice versa. So there's something in that. But at first, she just wants to die. And Aragorn, when they're exchanging words, says to her that he has no command, or rather that she has no command to march with the men southward to face the battle in front of the White Tower. Says that neither do any of the men who come with thee. Neither of those others that go with thee, they go only because they would not be parted from thee, because they love thee. Now the word thee here is very intimate in English. It's not you. It's the language is seductive, actually. She's expressing what's in her heart. She wants to be with him. And again, you have to read into the text a little bit here. And we know something that's not really made that patent in the story, but we know that it is there, which is that Aragorn is already betrothed. He's committed to another woman. And he sees a woman who loves him and can't reciprocate. So how does he treat her then? And that is a model of charity as well. And how do you stick handle this, if you will? Because this is a very difficult situation. So he admires her. He doesn't want to just say, forget it. And he can't even entertain the possibility of anything with this. And so he wants to steer her, and he feels compassion for her. Remember, he's older as well. There's a young woman, he's 90, whatever, because he rode with her grandfather into battle, which she can't believe. But he's seen this before, and he feels sorry for her, because he recognizes that with youth comes a sort of despair. It's easier for youth to fall prey to despair, because they don't have the virtue of the resilience that comes with suffering. That comes with age. That's part of that. I mean, the youth are marked by their vibrancy and hope, but they really easily get knocked over, and they can't get back up. And he sees that although she does love him, it's not rightly ordered. She's infatuated by him. So what does he do with that? Well, first thing is he recognizes it's not really him that she loves. It's what he seems to represent to her. And so there's idolatry going on here. And that's part of the courtly love tradition. It's not inappropriate. He's not married, but he is betrothed. He knows that. She doesn't know that. He doesn't say that, actually. But he gives this confession to her brother Éomer. He says this: few other griefs amid the ill chances again this word chance, of this world have more bitterness and shame for a man's heart than to behold the love of a lady so fair and brave that cannot be returned. And yet, Eomer, I say to you that she loves you more truly than me. For you she loves and knows, but in me she loves only a shadow and a thought, a hope of glory and great deeds, and lands far from the fields of Rohan. So she loves her brother, not obviously not in the same romantic way, but she genuinely loves him because she knows him. She doesn't even know Aragorn. She just sees a mighty man leading men in battle, and she is happy to follow that idol to her own destruction. Her heart's been poisoned by growing up without a father. Remember, the king of the Golden Hall is not her father. Her father's died. Her brother is gone. She's left in the hall, and she has worm tongue whispering in her ear, and it makes her lose hope. He's trying to twist her heart, and you can see that she even says, your words are poison. They go into her heart. It's not just that he says them. She's actually believing enough of it to make her feel that there's no hope, and there's who's going to rescue you. They try to do it in the movie, but it doesn't come off very well, because he just looks too disgusting in part. And he's just like slimy and whatever, which maybe he should be, but it's not supposed to be worm face, it's supposed to be worm tongue. He should look better, I think, because it's more probable then and plausible if worm tongue looks fair and acts foul. And he's both. He looks more like Gollum. Yeah, that's not bad casting there. Or if not the actor, then the appearance. Don't make him look so slimy, right? Whereas his words are poison. That's the point, and that's why he is a servant of Saruman, whose words are also said to be in the same way. Like, watch out for his tongue. When he speaks, beware. That's when you're in deep trouble. That's the false teaching. It's the seduction. And that false teaching has been whispered in her ear, deprived of a father, her uncle, neglecting her, spending not enough time with her. She's brokenhearted. He doesn't spend enough time. He's too busy with his own cares. And Wormtongue's been speaking in his ear as well. So this warps her, and it is only when she's in the houses of healing that you actually see she meets somebody that is like Aragorn and yet appropriate for her, and that is Faramir. He's also healed by the experience as well. A very touching scene. It's sad that it's left out of the films. But again, there's so much richness that it would be hard to put everything in. Anyway, but she grows in this way, and I see, and simply is transformed by it in a way so that she's actually healed, which is a great illustration of what the effect of true virtue is, and grace is. It actually restores what is ruined. And in this case, it changes her heart, and it's described as a light coming on her where there was a darkness or a shadow before. The shadow is lifted, and she's cheered by that, and she walks hand in hand with Faramir, etc. Allied with this prudence is a generosity and a magnanimity that will not act on petty small things. And it's prudence, though, that allows the moral growth of the character, and that is what is needed in the senior figures in the story. And by that I mean Aragorn and Gandalf and even Frodo. Frodo becomes like this as well. At the end, when the ring is destroyed, he becomes a figure of wisdom himself. He won't fight anymore. He won't bear a sword. For whatever reason, he's a little bit like, in fact, it just struck me now, Frodo is a little bit like Ransom in the end. He's been his wisdom has made him into a different character than he was at the beginning. He's been damaged by his suffering, and yet and is actually not even received when he goes back to the Shire. He's not even praised. Like the company is, but Frodo is. He rides in and nobody. It's as if he's a nobody, and it pains Sam to see his master not be acknowledged at all for what he suffered and what he did. But there is a growth throughout here in the here and back again. Remember, that's the name of the stories of Bilbo, the here and back again. The back again, they come back very different than they left. They're bigger, like in stature, but more in their character. They're now fit and prepared to steward Middle-earth in the same way that Gandalf says that he's a steward, and in Gondor there's a steward. And now we've come to the development of the other characters where they're ready to play their role. So there's that moral growth and development there. Frodo's is marked by his a particular type of magnanimity, and that is his mercy. If it's right, Frodo does it. And it doesn't matter what it costs him. He does what's right. And will not turn to the left or the right when it comes to his task, which is to destroy the ring. He is not, it doesn't matter what the obstacle is, he is going to do what it takes. But very interesting, those two things, because they don't seem to match up very well. He's sworn an oath, he's committed to doing this, he doesn't depart from that. At the same time, that sort of resolution to do what needs to be done is tethered with something that doesn't seem to fit with it, which is mercy for other people. Because normally when people are single-minded, they're ruthless. Nothing will get in my way, right? If so Gollum gets in his way, you're gone, right? Because I have to take the ring here, and you're trying to take the ring. And Sam says, take him out. Can we not kill him? He won't do it. And even Sam, like, my master's a fool. I can see what he's doing. He is betraying us. He is just waiting for his moment. And Frodo acknowledges that he's right. Yes, he is. That's his plan. So it's not a lack of wisdom, but he is going to be willing to be committed to those two things. He gave his word, and he's going to stick to it, and he's not going to be dissuaded in any way, and yet he's still going to be merciful. So how do those two things actually work in a person? Have you ever met somebody like this? I have not. Obviously Christ, right? But a person, if it's a person who's very determined, very able, they are ruthless, single-minded, and will cast people aside when they're not useful anymore, and will run over them, basically. And everyone admires those people, by the way, because they have success. But Frodo is so committed to mercy that it's the very thing that, when his virtue fails, allows the quest of the ring to succeed, because it is, and there's a bit of a paradox here. It is the one who betrays him who betrays himself. So evil destroys evil. Isn't that extraordinary? So he gets like when Gollum finally gets the ring, he is wholly possessed of the ring. There's nothing good left in him. He sees, and it showed like he's a dark figure against the backdrop of Mount Doom, which you can imagine, the fiery temple. You just see a black figure. And that's actually how Sam describes it. There are two black figures. And then the one gets his finger bit off, and that restores him. Interestingly, a little bit light left. While he had the ring on, he was only black. Part of the mercy of the Valar there is that Frodo gets something of himself back when he loses his finger. Yes?
When we were talking about that last class, I kept thinking about that passage that says, if your hand causes you to sin, cut it off.
Yeah.
Your eye.
Yeah.
It's like that idea of like get rid of what would otherwise totally corrupt the rest of your person. And
It's seen as hyperbole, right?
Right.
Because Jesus doesn't mean it literally.
Right.
Otherwise, his followers will be going around, with eyes plucked out and no hands. But it is speaking of the gravity of sin and really how committed you need to be this. It actually has to be. I actually think he does mean it literally, but it's not something you will do. It has to be done to you. You need a new heart. So it's an impossible task. But being born again can accomplish that task. Christ can do that task. So you can't do it, but you in him can. Or he in you, however you want to put it. How does Scripture put it? If I can find it here. No, I cannot. So let me give me a sec. Come up eventually here. Get rid of the ads. So there's a great spiritedness in all of the characters and the magnanimity that grows in all of them. They become bigger than themselves. And that is admirable. But again, that's a path. Magnanimity is what Aristotle says marks in his Nicomachean Ethics is what marks the man of virtue. He's a great-souled man. He has every virtue, and Frodo has all of these, and that's what allows Gandalf to leave. By the way, and depart the Grey Havens is now the company has those virtues, and now they can act in his absence as if they could when he was present. But this is the passage I wanted to read. Colossians 3, verses 1 to 4. I wish it would stop doing this. There we go. If then you've been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. That seems to me what's happening in the story here. They recognize that there's a life that is above their life, and they've been willing to lay down their lives or ignore the cost to their lives, and at the same time they take on a new life. So Gandalf the White has that life. Again, it's put in rather veiled terms in the Lord of the Rings, but there's something of that. There's a growth above and outside of the characters themselves that they could not possibly attain themselves. It's a grace given to them. I'm going to talk. I said I'd talk about that next time. I'm already pulling it in here because I have to see that as part of this. And then at the end of that, Gandalf crowns his friends as well and sends them out and says, "Now you're ready. Now you're ready. Now you're ready for that." How about justice? I've spent too much time on this, and I'll just blank this now. Justice. I mentioned already prudence. How about justice? Justice is, again, giving everyone their due. You give them in accordance with what they've done to you. Right? And the words justice appear far more frequently than every other virtue mentioned as the virtues, aside from love, which again is a theological virtue. But justice is over and over in Scripture. We hear about it all the time. In fact, these days Christian universities talk about it constantly because of the social justice movement, which distorts the whole picture. But still, justice is clearly described in Scripture as something that we should be hungering after and desiring. And it's part of God's righteousnness, his commandment, that we be holy as he is holy. Leviticus 19:2, right? And without righteousness, no one will please the Lord. So it's there, and it's presented as a reward and also as a punishment. If you don't do these things, then you're going to be cursed. Right? In Deuteronomy, it talks about the blessings and the curses. If you do these things, you'll live. If you don't, you'll die. It's very closely related to what we've talked about in the Lord of the Rings as doom. And we associate doom with doomsday, judgment day. And not only does God command us to be just, but he himself is just. utterly just. And this is part of the whole prophetic ministry here. And it seems to be indiscriminate with respect to person. So justice is supposed to be the same for your own country and outside your country. And it's also for people irrespective of whether they are rich or powerful. In fact, it's explicitly, specifically for the widow and the orphan and the poor. And there's a ministry, and it seems to be part of justice to give them what is their due. And it's not presented as you do it out of the, the goodness of your heart. They're due this. It's something that is due to them by virtue of the fact that they bear the image of God. So it's a strong enjoinder to do this. And part of that, again, is showing hospitality. It's the justice that a stranger is due. And it's one of the things that the king of Theoden is rebuked by Gandalf for. He doesn't receive him with courtesy. He says, the courtesy of your hall is somewhat lessened of late, Theoden, son of Thengel. This is a sharp rebuke. You're a king, yes, but you're less just. I mean, he is actually a king as well, unlike the steward of Gondor. This is a king. But they note how the fellowship benefits along the way from the courtesy and the hospitality shown to them repeatedly, acts of hospitality along the way. And how they also do the same to those that they encounter. They do little good deeds along the way, and they're being just in the process. And one of the things that it is said as a rebuke to the hobbits is that they are depending on others for their protection and doing nothing about it. Same thing is said to the Ents. You're not going to be left alone in this, and you have a part to play. You have to play your part. It's not just that we think it's a great cause and we need to encourage you to join the great cause. You have to do this. It's your duty to do this. It's just. You must do this. And eventually they get persuaded, but they need persuasion. But it's a persuasion to be just. Do the right thing. And what does that mean? Don't only look after your own self-interest. Don't be a hobbit all the time. You got to be more than what you are. Same with the Ents. Maybe it's time for the Ents to go on their last march. Maybe that'll be the end of the Ents. Is that the right thing to do? Yes, it is. How about the elves? The elves want to leave Middle-earth. We want you to stick around. No, we're going to go. Are they going to show up? Like all of them, same thing. There's temptations among the various species of creatures to shirk the fight, not get involved. That's somebody else's fight. Boromir says rightly, we've been defending you folks against Sauron for a long time. Our people have been dying for you, and you're doing nothing. And the response of the elves is that men can't be trusted, which must rather rankle. Because the elves are stuck in their, Rivendell and elsewhere, and they're not out fighting and dying like they once did. So again, they all need to be encouraged to join in the fight. And the appeal to do that is in terms of justice. It's the right thing to do, and you must bear your part. Are you not part of Middle-earth? Are you not involved in the fate of the ring? Do you want to see everything good and fair and beautiful perish? And we see a lot of complacency at the beginning of the film. And again, this is part of the development not only of the character then, but of the whole peoples of Middle-earth. It's a better world than it was when we first entered it. At the beginning, the privation of the good had extended to the point where shadow was spreading and threatened to encompass everything. There would be nothing left. It would all be under the dominion of darkness. By the end, it's been pushed back. The light has come. The more of the trees are growing. There's hope for the future, etc. Till the next time. That's sitting there on the horizon. Till the next time. When the same thing, for Tolkien's audience, it's a clear lesson. Yeah, you have to resist evil. You must do it. It's only just. You can't say that we're just going to stick it out because fighting is a bad thing. Fighting is evil. And the hobbits are effectively corrupted by living lives of ease. So when Frodo is told by Gandalf that he has been called to destroy the ring, he says that he's not made for quests like that. I'm not made for perilous quests. Not me. Same thing Moses says when God calls him. You got it wrong. I can't talk. I can't do that. You know, I'm not. My brother's is the one who's good at speaking, not me. Okay, well he can come along with you. Oh, shit. Okay. God doesn't get it wrong. Likewise here, there's a sense. No, you've been called to do this, and you don't have the ability to do this, but you will be given something that you lack along the way. That's a story of Christian discipleship in general. If you're aware that you lack the ability to do something, that's a good thing. That will give you humility. If you think that you're God's gift to everybody because of how wonderfully gifted you are, you're a problem in the making. I know a lot of people like that. For his part, Gandalf actually knows that Frodo is being a little bit too modest because he says he's the best of the hobbits. And at the same time, he warns Frodo exactly about this. Never assume that you're incorruptible. That's a hard one. It's really hard for a good character to think that he could be corrupted. Very difficult. And when it comes to the question, well, why did the ring come to me? Why not come to one of the characters that is clearly more virtuous, clearly superior to me? He's not being modest when he says that, like an Aragorn or you or Glad. And Gandalf says this: such questions about chosenness cannot be answered. You may be sure that it was not for any merit that others do not possess, not for power or wisdom at any rate, but you have been chosen, and you must therefore use such strength and heart and wits as you have. So again, there's wisdom on Gandalf's part to recognize that there is a reason, but he himself doesn't know what it is. It's not these things. So you're right, Frodo, it's not because of power, wisdom, wits, it's none of those things. But it has come to you, and so it's right. And now you're going to have to deal with that. That, again, immediate practical application to everybody reading it. So the commitment to justice needs first to be addressed in terms of the company's own proclivity to injustice. And one of them is the racism. That's a form of injustice. Sometimes it's just greed. It's what led the dwarves to dig too deep. In that sense, they're going in the direction of that character in Out of the Silent Planet. Divine. Yeah. He's after mud's blood or sun's blood, the gold. He wants the shiny stuff. He's the perversion of the elves. All he's after is the gold. They became too greedy. They dug too deep. They weren't only interested in building things. They lost the purpose of building things that were beautiful, but loved the wealth that came with it. Because how much money is that shirt you're wearing worth, Frodo? It's worth more than the whole Shire. I didn't have a heart to tell him. Right? Maybe he would have sold it. Bought the whole Shire with it. He's wearing this shirt, right, of mithril. That's how valuable that is. I'm not even going to tell you that. Right, but the dwarves become greedy and go for that. So they lose a sense of the justice that and the purpose of what is their chief virtue. And just like in Lewis's works, the humanities scholar and the scientist and the practical man, all three of them are distorted when they first leave the silent planet. A question or comment?
I was just going to say that I think the greed is a really good point too, because it often leads them to like not only hoard it, but just kind of lives in solitude in their own mountain dwellings.
Like a dragon.
Exactly. And
That's
so
what the dragon does.
I feel like that doesn't help the racism aspect, where the elves are like, okay, well, are you going to share any of this to benefit everyone?
Right.
But
Because it comes from the
there's
earth.
no interaction really between
None.
the dwarves and the elves.
Right.
So there's no even possibility of friendship because they don't reach out.
No, they don't even want to communicate. Won't even allow them to send ambassadors. This is what the Council of Elrond is so extraordinary about it, is that they have come there and spoken and seen other races for the first time in how long? Even the men are at odds with the elves. Aragorn is an unusual figure. In fact, the men have fallen so far out of touch with the other races that they're like legendary characters. Like, oh, I heard about these in nursery rhymes, and now they're in front of me, and they're sort of laughing, the halflings. And as I say, the Ents have totally forgotten the hobbits even existed, so they've totally lost touch with one another as races. They live totally independently. And because they're divided like this, they cannot unite. And again, that's part of the wisdom of Gandalf and Aragorn, who's bringing up the rear, is to bring the company to realize we have to band together. And the character of and purpose of the banding together is not going to be what you might think. We're not going to go beat Sauron in battle like we once did when the ring was cut from his finger. It's going to be different this time. And again, note the progression of the plot there. The first battle, physical battle, they cut off his ring. Great, they beat him. Second battle, no, it doesn't. It's going to cost them more, and it's less of a physical battle. What's the next battle going to be like? Now that's where he's pointing, and it's like, okay, well, what's the next? And we all know it'll be a man, and he will be a lot like all of these other characters and all these features. But that's pointing towards that. It's outside again the context of the whole story, but it is hinted at by the progression there between a physical battle, which we read about in the Old Testament, and I think actually that's what's being exhibited in the Old Testament, by the way. It is a sort of a literal depiction of a battle which is ultimately a spiritual battle, but is clearly depicted as a spiritual battle in the New Testament. And that actually tells us what was at stake in the original battles. It was actually always a spiritual battle. They just didn't recognize it, and now we do. Why do we recognize it? Because Christ tells us that it was a spiritual battle, and Paul says that our enemies are not flesh and blood. So there's a lot of greed and lusting after things, cupidity, lusting after. The hobbits aren't interested in gold. They're happy with pipeweed and beer and food, feasting. Yeah, they eat 6 meals a day. And we sort of chuckle, right, and makes them very likable, rightly so. But it makes them committed to possessiveness, right? And possessiveness is a grasping thing. And again, it's like the sin of Gollum. It's my precious. He wants to grasp it. He wants to keep it in his power. He can't let it go. Can't give it away. And they're all inclined towards this. And when the story begins, we see them divided, possessive, selfish, greedy, and suffering from all these things. So it's almost a political novel in the sense that it's speaking about political justice and injustice. When they encounter mercy, they go crazy. Let me read this passage. Because Saruman he's motivated by the lust for power. He's greedy. He wants he wants to replace Sauron. And he has the power to do it. He's strong enough as a being. He could do it, and he has plans to do it. And because of this, his mind as Treebeard says, he used to walk with the trees. Now he's a mind of metal. Or he used to walk along with us, alongside of us, have fellowship, solidarity with us. Now we never see him anymore. What does he do? He burns the trees. He uses them to magnify his own power. And when he's pardoned in the end by Gandalf, he can't take it. He is furious at the pardon. Remember when he's up in the Tower of Orthanc and Gandalf pardons him? Nothing incenses him like that. So I'll read. And he says, all you have to do is surrender your staff and give me the key to the fortress tower, and then you can do as you please. There's mercy for you. That's all you have to do. He goes crazy. Here's the passage. Saruman's face grew livid, twisted with rage, and a red light kindled in his eyes. He laughed wildly. Later, he cried, and his voice rose to a scream. Later! Yes, when you have the keys of Barad-dûr itself, I suppose, and the crowns of 7 kings, and the rods of the 5 wizards, and have purchased yourself a pair of boots many sizes larger than those that you wear now. A modest plan. Hardly one in which my help is needed. I have other things to do. Do not be a fool. If you wish to treat with me while you have a chance, go away and come back when you are sober, and leave behind these cutthroats and small ragtag that dangle at your tail. He's totally intransigent. He's raging. The offer of mercy is totally rebutted. He wants to be treated as a superior, not as an equal even, or not even with the mercy of being able to walk away from it all. And he becomes a lot like Shelob, who's bloated on the carcasses of others. He sucks up the life. It's a portrait of evil, and you see it in various forms. Sauron being one, but Saruman being another, Shelob being a third. They're totally self-obsessed. And the fourth, of course, being Gollum himself. All pictures of evil and what it does to the individuals that are most given to it. In response to mercy, they go crazy. They don't want mercy. They hate it. It suggests that they have a power outside of them that they have to submit to. The one thing they can't tolerate. The most pathetic of them is Gollum, who he is humanized for a bit. And he's being drawn by the goodness shown to him. In the end, he gives over to it, but to the evil. But these other figures like Saruman and Shelob the spider and Sauron are purely evil characters. I guess the Balrog, but Balrog doesn't have any speech or character per se. But very dark and self-absorbed. Yeah, and we even get something of Shelob's mind. It says that. Let me read this. Shelob, she served none but herself, drinking the blood of elves and men, bloated and grown fat with endless brooding on her feasts. So she's thinking about the feasts. Weaving webs of shadow, for all living things were her food, and her vomit, darkness. Far and wide her lesser broods, bastards of the miserable mates, her own offspring that she slew, spread from glen to glen. But her lust was not Gollum's lust. Little she knew or cared for towers or rings or anything devised by mind or hand, who only desired death for all others, mind and body, and for herself a glut of life, alone, swollen till the mountains could no longer hold her up and darkness could not contain her. So she's a different manifestation, but of the same selfishness and the pride of life, it's a disgusting portrait, right? But very much like the other ones in its self-absorbed, twisted, self-centered nature. A comment? I think we're done. I'm sorry.
Well, just kind of like a commentary on literary device of like how Tolkien uses like that S.
Oh yeah.
In those names.
Terrific.
It really does begin to prep your mind to be like, okay, like this character, there's something sneaky.
You're right. As soon as you hear the name, you sort of have a sense.
Yeah.
You're correct. Yeah, it's very well done. And if we have a sense of Anglo-Saxon words, then we get even more from it. He has more in mind than we might suggest from a modern English reading of his words. like the word shadow, as I've talked about, having this sense of being twisted and having multiple connotations. Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Okay.